Well, welcome back to another episode of Feelin the Healin with Foltzy. I am ecstatic about my guest today. This is the first time we've actually filmed outdoors, so I'm hoping I don't want to get attacked by a bee or something, but that'll make for some funny kind of bloopers or something. So Jessica Pittard, she is a USDF bronze, silver, and gold medalist. And she has been riding and competing in the equestrian arena for over 20 years. Her and her husband, Pat, are owner and operators of Marble Hill Farm, which you're going to see some footage of. This place is magnificent. She is currently, she is dedicated to the pursuit of excellence in the dressage arena. Pronounce that right?
You got it right, yes. A lot of people like to say dressage.
Dressage arena, and as a Grand Prix rider and trainer. And she's been nominated this year for the University of Georgia 40 Under 40 Award, which is pretty exciting. So that'll come out in, like, what'd you say, August?
This summer sometime.
So welcome to this episode. I'm so glad to have you here. I've been wanting to do a show that has something to do with horses and riding because it's such a unique sports, because there's all different types, which we'll discuss some of that in a little bit.
Yep.
But first I want to delve into a little bit of you growing up and kind of how you got into, because I know a lot of little girls, Daddy, I want a pony.
Yep.
But I want to go into kind of your childhood and kind of your pathway into what you're doing and kind of and where you ended up. And so tell me about it.
Sure. So the first thing I ever remember wanting was a horse. The first memory I have of asking Santa for something, I asked him for a horse. I didn't want a pony. I wanted a horse. There were no ponies for me. And I think that stemmed from my uncle had horses, and we lived in Utah at the time I was growing up there. And my mom would take me out to his barn. He had Western horses, so reining and just trail horses, and let me ride. And he would bring them. So my mom's family is all Mormon. Big family reunion. He would bring his horses to the family reunions and let all the kids ride. So I think that's probably where I got introduced the idea of a horse. There are pictures of me in front of my mom before I could walk. So I think it was before even conscious memory is created. But it was always a drive. It was always something I wanted.
Okay, so then when you finally got a horse, tell me about when was that?
Okay, so I moved around quite a bit as a kid, and I grew up in Salt Lake with my family. Then we moved to South Georgia. I started riding there. When we moved away from my family, I wanted horses in my life. And so I asked my mom, I said, please, can I take riding lessons? Please, can I take riding lessons? And she said, if I'm going to pay somebody to teach you how to ride, you have to learn to ride English. And I didn't care at the time. I was like, I just want to ride horses. English, Western, it doesn't matter. And so I started taking lessons. Then we moved from South Georgia to out west, and then eventually Boise, Idaho. And I had stuck with it. Once I started riding, I had stuck with it. And so everywhere we moved, we looked for a new place to take riding lessons. And I had started at a place there in Eagle, which is just outside of Boise. And so it kind of starts a little bit before I got my first horse. That's why I'm rambling a little bit about this, because it wasn't just like, oh, I grew up riding my uncle's horses and then one day got my own horse. There was a few steps in between there. But when we settled in Eagle, and the farm that I started riding there was called Once Upon a Horse, And they had a great program where they let their students work in order to pay for their lessons, because they knew not everyone had the funds that it takes to ride, and they wanted to instill a sense of discipline and work, that you had to work for the privilege of riding horses.
Yeah.
And so when I started riding there, I was 10, turning 11, and I started working at that time at the barn to pay for my lessons. And that went on for a little bit, and I would ride. They had a great program of they had lesson horses that they owned that people could take lessons on, and then you could lease. And we had leased a couple horses. And I finally convinced my folks to buy me a horse. And at the time, my dad was working for the Idaho State. He was an attorney. He was under the Idaho State Attorney General's office, and one of the areas that he dealt with and represented was the racetrack in Boise. And so he was kind of helped with the regulation around racing and the stewards there. And which is funny because my dad knew nothing about horses. He had zero horse interest at all, but he knew the backside of the racetrack. And one of the stewards said, "Hey, we know of this mare. She would be perfect for your daughter's first horse. She just injured herself. She can't race anymore. They're going to quit racing her. But she'd be a great sport horse."
So that's how you got your first horse.
That's how I got my first horse. They sold her to us for $600. She was broke down. They had taken her off the track on the little horse ambulance trailer that they go out, and she had what's called a bowed tendon. And so horses have a tendon that runs along from their front knee to their ankle, and it's called their flexor tendon. And she had injured that and tore it. And it was the second time she had done it. So she had this big fat, normally it's nice and straight here, and she had this big fat, little half moon shape coming off of it. But even though she was a good girl, she was still a 5-year-old, which is young for horses, retiring off the racetrack, which they are trained to go and give 110% every time they're asked to do something. So she had a lot of energy, and she was sweet and kind, but definitely not probably what you wanted for the first horse of a 12-year-old girl, and parents who didn't know anything about horses. And my coaches at the time were not happy with my parents for buying me this horse. But they helped. They went. We didn't have a truck and trailer, nothing. We bought her. We were on the back side of the track, bought the horse for cash, said, "Okay, we'll arrange for her to pick up." Called my trainer, said, "Can you pick her up?" They picked her up, took her to their vet to look over the injury and figure out what we needed to do to rehab her from it. And she wouldn't get on the trailer. Then she got on the trailer and panicked. She got to the vet's office and panicked. And the vet said, who had a wife who did dressage at the time, and he was like, "I wouldn't let my wife ride this horse. Why did you buy your daughter this horse?" And so my folks are freaking out. We get home, because at the time we had 5 acres and a little barn, and get the horse there. And when we had bought the horse, there was a nice lady on the backside of the track who said, "Hey, I love this mare. If you run into any problems, let me know. I'd like her as a brood mare." And so my parents had kept her number, and they called her and they said, "Shelly, you got to come get this mare." The vet said my daughter shouldn't ride it. He wouldn't even let his wife ride it. My trainers were upset. And she was like, no. The mare is fine. That was a lot to ask for a horse that had an injury and I forgot to mention, but she had had an accident in the ambulance trailer. So she was a little freaked out about trailers because she was a big horse and they had put her in this small trailer that she had got claustrophobic in. And so it was all it was my first introduction, and it was so great for Shelley to say that, of the psychology behind horses.
Yeah, we're going to talk about
We'll
some of
get
that in
there,
a little
I know.
bit. That's what I'm really, my wheels are turning right now as you're talking about this.
And she was like, I'm not going to take the mare yet, but I will come show you and your daughter how to take care of the injury that she has and what needs to happen for the next 12 months for her to successfully rehab to be able to do what you want for your daughter. And she did. We rehabbed the mare. I went on to show her in dressage. It was really cool. Everybody learned a lot in having that as our first horse, but it was kind of
And then
a cool
I know at
experience.
some point you ended up in Florida. Now, when the Florida destination is kind of where I think things elevate a little bit there as far as...
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I was living in Idaho, dreaming of a career as a professional rider. And so for what I was doing, which was eventing, I looked at, there was Philip Dutton, Karen and David O'Connor were these legends that had been to the Olympics multiple times, and they were in every magazine that you read as a girl. And I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And kind of an audacious goal for a little girl living in Idaho, where the closest horse show, other than the one that was held at the farm that I rode at, was 6 hours away, and it went from there. We'd drive 12 hours just to go show for a weekend. It was hard to come by. It's harder to come by out west, the equestrian events. But I had read an article in a magazine that talked about these programs that those top riders have, where young, dedicated riders could join their team and basically be an apprentice. They call it working student, and you just work for free, basically, but you get to learn from the best. And I said, I want to do that. And so I was a freshman in high school. I went to my counselor and I said, I want to graduate a year early because I want to spend a year riding before I go to college. And they said, okay, no problem. It was a public school, but it was a really good school that I went to in Idaho with a lot of different athletes and students who had different pathways. We had drama students, other sport athletes that they had they already had a model in place for if you wanted to be different, then they would put you through. And so I did that. And I'm only bringing this part in is because there's a sort of the circle of life comes back around. And so it was myself and another girl named Lindsay Burns. Well, it was Lindsay Comstock at the time. And Kate Shoemaker and I all rode at Once Upon a Horse and took from the coaches there. And we were in high school together in Eagle High. And we all wanted to be the best riders that we could be. I mean, we were if you looked up horse girl in the dictionary, there'd probably be a picture of the three of us. And we all kind of decided we wanted to be on track to graduate early. We started high school at 6:40 in the morning, which is called 0 hour, which was either for the other athletes or somebody who, if they had failed a class, needed to make an extra class up without holding a grade. Kind of that's what that existed for. So we'd take our first class at 6:40. We were the Three Musketeers. Had this plan in place. The summer before my senior year, my parents say, guess what? We're pregnant. So I had been an only child up until that point. I was going to have a little brother, and we're moving to Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay.
Yeah. And I was not happy being, a 16-year-old girl with a plan in place, and my very best friends doing it with me. And anyway, long story short, moved to Wisconsin. I think it's the end of the world because I've left now behind this great society that I've built up with riding. And we had gone from the one horse off the track. We had like 5 horses. We had to sell all but one of them to come with me. And I'm just a little sullen starting life. And the coach that I start riding with in Wisconsin is making plans to move to join his fiance, who already lives in Ocala, Florida, to ride on the very top equestrian circuit for eventing. And through the process of working for him and working with him that senior year, said, hey, we have an opportunity for a working student position if you would like to join us in Florida, in Ocala, but we need you in January. And it was October of my senior year. And I was like, I'll do it. I'll make it happen. Because this was what I had planned.
The door's open.
And I was,
the door opened up. Yes.
Yeah, I was like, holy crap. Because while I had read this and I had planned for it and I had this in mind, I still had no idea when I was back in Idaho how I was going to get to Pennsylvania or Ocala, Florida with contact. You know, I had no contacts. I knew nobody. And so it turned out that what I thought was one of the worst turns of luck in my life, that I had to leave everything behind right before my last year of high school, and my plan and everything actually opened the door for what I was planning. And
I'm going to interrupt you here for a second, because I've interviewed multiple guests that it's incredible how a door will shut for them and another one opens at the right time for them to step through it to then pursue their passion. And so it's really cool to hear, like, even you say that today. I mean, it almost gives me chill bumps, because, you know, I think some kids today or people today feel like they're crushed with certain things, but then if they just let it unfold, that next thing will come along. So I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, I mean, but it is so true. And it's easy to say now, sitting on the porch of my own farm, like, oh, that was the door that opened when one closed. At the time, as a 16-year-old girl, I really felt like my world was ending, but I still showed up to ride my horse and take care of it and meet a new trainer and work for them and work and like show what I knew and my value of working. And that's really the only reason that door even then opened for me. It could have gone the other way, and I could have said, well, I'm not going to ride I'm no more effort, right? Like, well, that's it. I give up. And then it wouldn't have happened at all for me.
So when you're down there, you still, through the course of all this, as a young teenager, you were not only taking care of your horse, but you're getting hands dirty.
Oh, very dirty.
Yeah, you're in there grinding it out. Kind of making it happen. Working.
So the working student position sounds very glamorous and glorified, but you are the grunt. You are the bottom of the totem pole of this operation. That includes the riders I worked for hadn't been to the Olympics, but they were aspiring Olympic athletes, and they worked with Olympic athletes. They worked with the O'Connors. So through that, I ended up working with them too. But I mean, still, you start out very bottom, and it's sort of like in college when you hear somebody say like it's a weed out class. That's what a working student program is. It's like a lot of people who start them leave within the first 2 months. Because you're waking up 3, 4 in the morning, and sometimes your days don't end until 10 or 11 p.m. at night. Over and over.
You've got to want it bad.
You have to want it.
And that's where the little girl with wanting the pony, it starts. If they really want it, then they've got to really want it. And that level you're talking about, that where you're at that level of Grand Prix. That's that Olympic level.
That's that.
And that's where you're right at that level. That's. Yeah, we're going to talk more about the sport in a little bit, because I think I've ridden a horse before, and I know how after an hour I'm exhausted and I'm barely walking for 2 days. So we're going to talk about the athleticism.
But you're just sitting up there, right?
You're just sitting.
You're just
That's
sitting
it.
there.
That's all you're doing. So one of my questions was about the passion for the sport, but I think everything you just talked about embodied how that passion was developed and what you went through. And so, I guess it was, you're more or less, and I talk about this too, is this DNA that people have.
Yeah.
Some DNA people are born to be a race car driver, or they're born to be a pro baseball player. They started off, or they took up football their senior year, and now they're, pro football player.
Yep.
But you obviously at a young age, you had this ability and a passion for something that, came together, and here you are today. This,
Yeah.
And that's incredible. I don't know. I can't even really explain what I'm envisioning right now. I can't. As far as now, you have obviously this passion and connection with animals.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
And I think about when you were telling the story about the racehorse that was kind of off the chain here a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
but at some point that connection you have with animals started getting honed in.
Yeah.
So tell me about. All right, let's just go ahead and let's talk about the horse whisperer.
Okay.
We talk about
that.
You know what? We're
You
going
brought
down
it
that
up.
road. We hear there's a
just
movie
jump
about
off the deep end.
Yeah. Let's just go. Let's jump in. We hear about horse whisperers and the horse whispering. Tell me about that.
Okay. So I think you want to say, like, is it fact, fiction, myth, legend, true, not true? I think there are parts of it that are true. It's like any Hollywood story, right?
Yeah.
It's based on fact.
Yes.
But the Horse Whisperer, the movie, for sure was exaggerated for Hollywood. But what it really embodies is there were a way, and this is out west. This is a little bit different from my discipline, so I apologize to the folks who it's their passion.
Yes.
But I'm going to do my best to represent it well. But there was a way to break horses out west as cowboys that really the term break horses illustrates how they started a horse under saddle. And it was, let's break their spirit. And if we break their spirit, they will then follow our lead. And there were a few very strong, very wonderful horsemen who said, I think there's a better way. And Monty Roberts is one, and that is who the movie The Horse Whisperer is loosely based on his philosophy. Another one is Buck Brannaman, and the cowboy that I work with studies under Buck, and then another one is Ray Hunt. And those are they're the old school, they're the founders of the horse whispering. Natural horsemanship is another term that's thrown around. But really what it is those guys said, hey, what if we don't have to break their spirit? What if we learn their language and get a partnership going with them and learn to communicate on some level that doesn't require the hobbling and spirit breaking, and then because that doesn't work for every horse. It works for some, but others you either never break their spirit and they get hurt, or a human gets hurt, right? So that's my take on the horse whisperer. And I was fortunate enough that Shelley, who I mentioned earlier, who said, I'll show you, how to, she touched on that philosophy about horses, and let's dive into their psychology of, they're not machines. They're an animal that has a brain that thinks, and they think very different than us because they're prey. We're predators. And if you think about that as you go into the relationship with them, you can understand why the vet said, this horse is dangerous. I wouldn't let my wife ride her. Well, what she was scared and trying to flee, because she's a prey animal. And when they are scared, they run, fight or flight. Right? Most horses fly. There are a few who fight, so you have to know both sides of that response. But most of them are going to move away. They're going to run. And if they are then trapped when they are trying to flee, you've got a 12 or 1400 animal that's trying to get away, that's trapped. Now it is really, it is very dangerous and it can kill you. But if you understand what's going on, you can reframe the situation for that horse and say, okay, I understand you're scared, but you're also a herd animal. I'm your leader. This is okay. Let's remove some of this pressure you're trying to fly away from and introduce this concept in a different way. So
and when you were talking about that, that's what made me think about the horse whispering thing, because I think in a sense, I mean, you probably don't consider yourself this, but us outsiders looking in, or me looking in on this, you have that innate ability to kind of foster a relationship with horses better than probably other people that don't have that in their DNA.
100%.
Yeah. I mean, you in your position and how you've grown up, I see that as how that's in your.
It was instinctual for me. It was very. I could watch a horse, and as soon as somebody taught me, and even before they taught me, I had picked it up, and I was like, oh, that's what I was picking up on. But I am very much a observer, and of people too. I will say horses are probably the #1 best trainer for how to manage your emotions and other humans' emotions.
No, it's funny you should say that, because when you were talking about breaking their spirit, I mean, I was thinking about people too, because I'm in the in medicine business, and I'm sitting there thinking there's times you have to foster what you do with people to meet them at their needs. And it's just that you were talking about that. I thought, wow, that's kind of like what I have to do on a daily basis. I have to change what I do instead of breaking someone's spirit to say, no, you're going to do it this way.
Right.
No, we have to change sometimes how we react to people. Same with horses, I guess.
It's the same.
Well, all right, let's talk about the differences between the events type of stuff. So dressage, tell us about the dressage, what it is and that kind of stuff.
Sure. So there's dressage. Well, let's start a little bit broader than that. There's English and Western. So 2 different saddles, very different ways and uses of horses. So Western, you're going to think barrel racing, ranch horses,
roping, all that. Okay,
right. Reining, cutting, rodeos. The American West. And then there's English, which is a more refined saddle, smaller, and its derivative it's really derived from cavalry horses, and getting in Europe and the aristocracy riding and cavalry horses. And dressage is fundamentally originally training horses for cavalry, and you really see that at the Spanish riding school. And they still do even some of those moves where it's called a levade or a capriole, and that's where the horse stands up on its hind legs or stands.
So that's part of dressage a little bit. Originally, okay.
Right, that was where it kind of it drifted down from, and the same thing is true for eventing, which is another discipline on the English side that's in the Olympics. So there's 3 disciplines that are in the Olympics for the equestrian sport. That's dressage, eventing, and show jumping. And eventing is truly, and that was my passion. That was really when I talk about riding as a kid, that was my passion. It was the adrenaline junkie's dream. And because you had 3 days. It was a triathlon, basically. The first day you did dressage, the second day you did cross country, and the third day you did show jumping, and that's called eventing. And the dressage is how there's a set arena that's a specific size with letters, and you have to do a set pattern, and you get judged. It's like gymnastics or figure skating. You get judged 1 out of 10, 10 being the best, on each of those movements in the pattern. And then in the upper levels of dressage, well, in all levels of dressage, but at the Olympics, everyone does the same pattern in the arena, the Grand Prix test. Mm-hmm. And then if you get a good enough score, you get to move on and you get to do your freestyle. And then everyone does their freestyle. And that's where you have to do their set movements that you have to show off, but you can pick the choreography and the music that you do it to. So that's dressage. Then eventing encompasses that, but at a lower level. You don't do musical freestyles in eventing. You just do a pattern. Everyone does the same pattern, gets judged on the movements 1 through 10. You get a score, and that score moves on the next day's cross country. And that's where you're out in a field and you gallop and you're jumping logs and ditches. And at the highest level, they used to back 2 pickup trucks and fill it with flowers, and you jumped over the bed of pickup trucks. And like the ditch and wall at what is now, well, it used to be called Rolex in Kentucky. It has a new sponsor, and I don't remember who the new sponsor is, but it's a ditch and wall. So there's a ditch in front of a brush fence, and you can drive a Land Rover through that ditch. That's how
the horse, and that has to be jumped.
Horse jumps the ditch and then over the brush fence.
Or at least you hope it does.
Yeah, or at least you hope it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so cross country is based on time. You have a certain amount of time. You have to be within the optimum time, and at any time over the optimum time, you get a penalty. And then if your horse doesn't jump, you get a penalty. It used to be if you fell off, you got a penalty, you get back on, but it has become, and it is so dangerous. It is now if you fall off, you can't continue on.
Yeah.
And then at the end of cross country day, you patch the horse up, patch the rider up. The next day you do show jumping, which is in an arena. I would say most people, if they think of jumping, probably have that in mind. It's like the painted rails.
Yeah.
And that again is speed and faults. So you want to be the fastest and you don't want to knock anything down. If you knock anything down, you get a penalty. And then at the end of the weekend of the 3 days, you get a score, and whoever gets the best score wins.
Okay.
And then show jumping is all they do is the show jumping part that I just talked about with the painted rails. So it's speed and
not knocking things over and not getting thrown in the water.
Yeah.
Or
And so, right.
Yeah.
And so dressage and show jumping so eventing really was the main like cavalry training. This is what we're going to do to get horses to be cavalry horses. And dressage spun off to its own sport. Show jumping spun off to its own sport. And in those individual sports, the highest level of dressage and show jumping exceed what an eventer does. Because an eventer has to do all 3.
I gotcha.
So at the end of a 3-day weekend, an eventer can't, a show jump in the Olympics is 1.60 meters. And it's not fair to ask a horse that just ran 5 miles and jumped over logs and ditches and trucks to then go jump 1.60 meters. And the same thing is true with dressage. It's a different athlete. So.
And that kind of brings me into that segues into the next thing as far as the athleticism that has to occur. You know, that's what's, like I said earlier, I don't think people understand it. When people are jumping a horse and then you guys make it look easy.
Yeah.
And it's not. I mean, there's a lot of training that goes involved and a lot of athleticism on your part and the horse's part and the mental part of it that has to happen. And that was, I wanted to talk about just the mental health and the physical health of the rider and the horse. Yeah. I mean, this is a daily thing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say almost every rider, but would say that their horses are better taken care of than they are, because part of our job as the rider is we're sort of the quarterback of the horse's care, right? And so we have a team of vets and farriers, so that's who puts the shoes on the horse. We have masseuses for the horses, acupuncture, chiropractor, nutritionists. A lot of riders work with specific feed companies that sponsor them. So our job is to make sure that our partner is the best athlete that they can be.
Yeah.
So that when we go into the arena and ask them to perform, we've done everything we can from an athletic standpoint to manage them. And then I would say a lot of us riders don't take care of ourselves in the same way that we do the horses. I am trying in my later years, definitely younger didn't at all. In my later years, I'm trying to take care of myself, the athlete, the same way. Because one of the unique things about riding is we can be Olympic athletes well into our later years.
Yeah.
You know, this year, I think, if he's not going, like Stefan Pittard has been one of our Olympians on the dressage side for a few years now, well into his 50s.
Yeah.
It can still be a dream. It can still be a goal, but you have to take care of yourself as an athlete if you want to make it there. And then the other thing that had to happen as I got older and wiser and just really more focused on, okay, well, yes, I'm a rider, but now I want to be at the top. Now I want those centimeters, not of improvement, you know, not leaps. And you have to cross train. Yes, riding is extremely physical. It is definitely, it would be cardio, I would say, if you're going to talk about like athletic endeavors. Us riding, it's a cardio workout, and you really need to cross train with strength and flexibility.
Yeah.
To be the best you can be.
I can see the strength too. I mean, the leg strength and just the hips to hold and to, and then the rider and the horse to just, I mean, I'm sure there's so much cohesiveness that has to occur. And I know a horse probably has to learn its rider.
Yes.
And that's why it's such a unique thing that I think that other than all the other sports where there's two, as a human, there's an animal that have to work together for a score and for a championship. I mean, that's what's so unique about it.
Yeah.
I know you've had some injuries.
Yes.
I know you had a big one here recently.
Yeah.
But have you had any others? We'll talk about your knee injury. But have you been thrown off horses? Have you been?
Yeah. So when I talk to all of my students and parents about it, if they're younger, and say it's not a matter of if, it's when. You're going to fall. I've fallen, I couldn't even count the amount of times I've hit the ground and hit the dirt. I've had a few serious falls, but thankfully, and I always hate this
knock on
question.
wood, yeah.
I don't like to bring it up.
No, it's okay. You just knock on wood. You're good.
But I have not had a significant injury falling. The closest I had is I landed head first warming up for cross country when I was eventing, and had a really, really bad, I've had a lot of concussions, and I had a really bad concussion then. And I'm sure probably had some problems in my neck and shoulder at the time, but now I'm just paying the price of arthritis and weakness. But one of the reasons I switched from eventing to dressage in the last 5 years is I have lost my desire to hit the dirt. And in eventing, out on cross country, there's so much going on. You're going so fast coming at these jumps that are huge, and they don't fall down when you hit them. And we're talking about a human and a horse, both mammals, sentient beings that make mistakes and make a lapse in judgment, and it happens like this.
Yeah.
And then you're on the other side, and your horse is rolling on top of you. And we've lost riders and horses falling that way, And we're talking about the best in the world. We're not talking about somebody who shouldn't have been doing it, which also happens.
Yeah.
But, and I was no longer, the adrenaline junkie in me had just gone out just a little bit. I wasn't willing. I just had lost my desire for it. And as soon as you've lost your nerve for it, you shouldn't be out there.
Yeah.
And so that's, many injuries. I would say also the horses injure themselves. And back to that team of people, we have to take care of them. I would say I have a lot of experience rehabbing horses from injuries, starting with my very first one. Really. That has given me a really good perspective on managing mental, physical, and just your body's healing process. So,
You were talking about how losing riders. I mean, for some reason, I don't know why this happened, but I thought of NASCAR, how a violent, you're talking about speed, and I said it's just something can happen like that, and it can be over.
Yeah, it's just
like it's just a bad NASCAR wreck.
Yeah. So I would say the most widespread, like, known person that got injured riding is Christopher Reeves.
Yes, that's right.
He fell off cross country.
Okay.
That's what happened.
He was quadriplegic. Yeah.
Yep. And you can argue whether he was fortunate or not, but that's the risk. Is you can end up that way. You can end up dead. In cross country, when I was young and an adrenaline junkie, I used to joke that I was in the only sport that they made you strap your medical information to your arm before you went out the start box.
That's
and it's true. You had to have your everything written there on your arm, so that if the EMT had to pick you up off the course and take you to the hospital,
that would be that would kind of be a deterrent for most people, right? Yeah.
You want to talk about managing your mental game.
But, right.
But that's where I said, if you've lost your nerve for it, you shouldn't do it.
Yeah.
Because that's when then mistakes happen and you do get hurt. Right.
Well, we've come to the point where I want to have you give some advice to some of the young equestrian enthusiasts.
Sure.
I mean, I know we hit on some parts that it takes grit, it takes getting your hands dirty, but what's some advice you got?
Yeah. My biggest advice is be willing to work hard. Show up, be reliable, be willing to work hard. You don't, I don't want to get into the political arguments of today's kids or whatever, but there is a overarching sense of entitlement, and that doesn't work with horses.
Yeah.
Because you have to come to your relationship with a horse humble and bare. And if you come in entitled, you're already not going to get the best from that horse. And so, and coaches recognize that, and it's true for me. And so come humble, come willing to work hard, and don't tell me, oh, I don't want to clean stalls, I don't want to shovel shit. Everybody's got to at some point if you're going to make it in the world.
Well, that may be even a little bit of what I always end on. I always like to get, I will call it the Jessica Pittard keys or strategies for success in life.
Sure.
I mean, maybe one of them is sometimes you just got to shovel a little shita.
Yeah. No, I would say that's probably number one, right? Yeah. It's just be willing to get in there and shovel.
Yeah.
And just keep shoveling until you get out of what you're looking for. The other one is, I think horses are really good life metaphors in lots of ways, but one is heartbreak. And that is, like, I think so many people get away from horses because their beloved horse dies when they're 11 or whatever, and they don't carry on. They don't know how to carry on. And it's like, keep keep carrying on.
Yeah.
Something else will happen. It's sort of like when I moved and
Yeah.
I thought my world was ending, something great happened. You know, I've been in a slow season this past 6 months. My very best horse died the very next day. My knee
Yeah.
got kicked and completely blew out, so I couldn't ride for 6 months. It's the longest I've gone without riding, except for one other time in my life, which was in college. And it was very hard to follow my own advice, but I have, and here we are on a beautiful evening. I still have a beautiful farm. I've got lots of young horses up and coming that I'm excited to get back and working with. I'm back in the saddle, which is big for my mental game. But it's sort of like that song, when you're going through hell, keep on going.
Yeah. And I guess it's a perfect analogy too. I mean, some people say if you fall off your bike, you get back up, but I guess if you fall off your horse,
you always get it.
Just
That's
get back
rule number
on.
one. If you're not, as long as I don't think you're concussed, and I don't think anything's broken, in that moment, you have to get back on the horse.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, your brain will make it more than it is, and it will be exponentially harder if you wait until even the next day. But if you can get it back in the saddle within minutes of hitting the ground, your brain's already forgetting that you hit the ground.
See, there you have it from Jessica. Just get back in the saddle.
Just get back up.
Whether it's
Keep
in
riding.
life,
Yep.
Great life lessons. You know, this has been an amazing interview with you. I mean, it's like I said, I'm sure we could talk until the sun goes down about
sure.
analogies with horses.
Yeah.
And we may have to maybe put a pamphlet or a booklet out we could add on to this. I don't know.
Right.
But I want to thank you so much for taking this evening and this time to spend with me, because this is something I've been wanting to talk about. And what better person than you
Well, thank you.
to shed light on this. So
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being on Feelin the Healin.
It's great.